She's been lying to you from the start. My mother's voice cut through the rehearsal dinner before the salad plates had even been cleared. Every fork stopped, every glass froze halfway to someone's mouth. Diane Ellis stood beside my fiancé's chair with one hand wrapped around a wineglass, and the other pointed at me like I was already guilty. My father, Robert, sat beside her with that calm, disappointed look he wore whenever he wanted the room to believe he was the reasonable one. Caleb didn't move. He only looked from my mother to me. Dad leaned forward and said, "Don't let her fool you, Caleb. Mara has a child, a son. She walked away from him and she was never going to tell you." Someone at the far end of the table whispered, "A child." My throat closed. My parents had paid the venue deposit. They had invited half the guests. They had spent months smiling at Caleb's family, calling themselves generous, heartbroken parents who only wanted the best for their daughter. And now they were using that image to bury me. Mom's mouth trembled, but her eyes were sharp. We kept quiet because we loved her, but I won't let my future son-in-law marry a lie. I forced one sentence out. "Don't do this here." The second I said it, I saw it happen. Caleb's mother gripped her napkin. One of my bridesmaids looked down at her plate. The room didn't hear a denial. They heard a confession. Mom exhaled like she had one. "She left a little boy behind," she said. Then she reinvented herself as this perfect bride. Dad added, "We warned you because someone had to." Caleb finally stood. His chair scraped against the floor, loud enough to make my mother flinch. He reached into his jacket, took out his phone, tapped the screen twice and turned it toward my parents. "Is this the child?" he asked. My mother's face lost every bit of color. My father's hand shot toward her arm. On Caleb's phone was a photo of a boy with my eyes, standing beside him outside a courthouse. And I had no idea how many people in that room were about to learn why Caleb already knew my son's name. 2 weeks earlier, Caleb and I came back to my apartment after a wedding planning dinner, where my mother had smiled so hard her lipstick cracked at the corners. The second we stepped inside, my phone buzzed. Mom's name filled the screen. I let it ring. Caleb was loosening his tie when the voicemail played through the speaker by accident. "You don't want me explaining your past to him, do you?" The apartment went still. Caleb looked at me, not angry, not suspicious yet, just careful. "Mara," he said, "what does she mean?" I reached for the phone too quickly and knocked it off the counter. The sound made me jump like something had broken inside the room. "It's nothing," I said. Caleb didn't move closer. He knew better than to corner me. "Your hands are shaking." I curled them into fists. My parents had always called their control love. They paid for my college, then reminded me whenever I disagreed with them. They helped me launch my event planning business, then acted like every client I booked belonged to them. And now they were paying for the wedding venue, which meant every decision came with a receipt and a threat. That night I told Caleb the smallest piece of the truth. "When I was 21, I said, something happened, something they still use against me." His jaw tightened. "Does it involve a child?" I couldn't answer. That silence said enough to change the air between us. Caleb stepped back like he had been hit, but his voice stayed low. "Then tell me what you're afraid they'll say." I stared at the floor. That I walked away. He didn't ask from who. He didn't demand names. He only watched me like he was trying to decide whether my fear sounded like guilt or a wound. Later, when he went to make tea, I opened the locked drawer where I kept old court papers. The envelope was gone. The one with Noah's name on it. I checked twice, then a third time. My emergency key was still on the hook by the door, but I knew my mother had made a copy years ago. Caleb came back and saw my face. "They were here," I whispered. He set the mugs down, picked up his coat and said, "Then tonight the locks change." By morning, his mother had already called him. And the first thing she said was, "Caleb, Mara's parents came by with something you need to see." Caleb's parents lived 20 minutes away, but by the time we pulled onto their street, I already knew we were late. My mother's car was in the driveway. My father was behind it. Caleb parked without speaking. Through the front window I could see people gathered in the living room. his parents, his sister, 2 groomsmen and my maid of honor, who had been helping with seating cards that afternoon. Then I saw the folder on the coffee table. Black marker across the front read, "Before you let him marry her." My knees nearly gave out on the porch. Caleb opened the door before I could turn around. Inside, my mother looked up with a practiced expression of pain. "Mara," she said softly, "I wish you hadn't forced us to do this." "You came here without telling me," Caleb said. Dad stood beside the fireplace with his hands folded, "because you deserved the truth before the wedding." Mom opened the folder and spread papers across the table. "There," she said, tapping one page, "guardianship papers, signed by Mara Ellis for a baby named Noah Ellis." Caleb's mother looked at me. "Mara, you have a son." The room tilted. "I did not abandon him," I said. Mom cut in immediately. "She gave birth, signed him away and moved on. We watched that child cry for her for months." Dad added, "She never came back." My maid of honor covered her mouth. One of Caleb's groomsmen looked at him like he should end it right there. I stepped toward the papers. "That guardianship was temporary." Mom's voice snapped. "Then where is he, Mara?" No one spoke after that. Because I couldn't point to a bedroom, a school picture, a birthday party, anything normal a mother should have had. Caleb picked up one document, his eyes narrowed. "This address," he said. "It says Mara lived at your house when she supposedly disappeared." Dad reached for the paper. "That's not important." Caleb pulled it back. "And this signature date, Mara was hospitalized then." Mom's face hardened. Caleb looked at her. "Where, the original court order?" "It's safe," she said. Dad's voice dropped. "Cancel the wedding before this embarrasses everyone." Something in me cracked. "You told me he was better off without me." My mother looked straight at Caleb. "And he was," she said, "until your fiancée started looking for him." By the next morning, the story had already escaped the room. My maid of honor called before 7. "Mara," she said carefully, "people are asking if it's true." I sat on the edge of my bed with Caleb beside me. His phone face down between us. "What people?" There was a pause. "Guests, vendors. Your mother told the florist there might not be a wedding. She told the caterer to hold final payment because you had deceived the family." Caleb reached for the phone, put it on speaker. My maid of honor's voice shook. "She's saying you abandoned a child." I closed my eyes. That was how my parents always did it. They didn't scream first, they made calls. They controlled the room before I entered it. Caleb ended the call, then opened his laptop. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. My stomach dropped. "What?" "After your mother's voicemail, I called a family attorney, then a licensed investigator." I pulled back. "You investigated me." "No," his voice stayed steady. "I investigated the story they were using to scare you." He turned the laptop toward me. There were records on the screen. Old addresses, medical dates, court filings. My parents' names appeared again and again, but not where they should have. Caleb pointed to one line. "Noah hasn't been living with Diane and Robert." I stared at it. "He's with your Aunt Elise." The room blurred. Aunt Elise was my mother's older sister, the one who stopped being invited to holidays after I got sick, the one my parents said had chosen sides. Caleb clicked another file. Returned packages, undelivered letters, birthday cards I had mailed every year until my mother told me to stop because I was confusing him. "They never gave these to him," Caleb said. I covered my mouth. "He was told you weren't ready to be his mother." A sound came out of me that did not feel human. That afternoon, my mother called Caleb herself. "If Mara doesn't cancel the wedding," she said, loud enough for me to hear, "we will tell everyone at the rehearsal dinner what she did." I grabbed Caleb's sleeve. "No, not Noah, he can't be dragged into this." Caleb looked at me, then dialed another number. When a woman answered, his voice softened. "Aunt Elise," he said, "only if Noah wants to come." 2 weeks later, my mother stood in the rehearsal dinner smiling like she still owned the truth. Caleb raised his phone and asked, "Is this the child?" Before Diane could answer, the doors behind her opened. Aunt Elise walked in first. Behind her was a boy in a navy button-down shirt, holding a bundle of envelopes tied with a blue ribbon. Noah. The room did not gasp. It went quieter than that. The kind of quiet where every person understands all at once that the story they were just told may have been staged for them. My mother stepped back so fast her chair bumped the wall. Noah, she whispered. My father's face turned grey. Elise, this is not appropriate. Aunt Elise looked at him. Neither was lying to a child for 12 years. I gripped the back of my chair until my fingers hurt. Every part of me wanted to run to Noah, but I didn't. I wouldn't make one more adult in his life decide for him. Caleb lowered his phone. I already knew about Noah, he said, his voice clear enough for the whole room. Mara told me enough to know her parents were using this to scare her, so I helped verify the records before Diane and Robert could turn it into a performance. Mom lifted her chin. We protected that boy. Noah placed the envelopes on the table. Aunt Elise found these in Grandma's storage boxes, he said. My breath caught. I knew the handwriting before I touched them. Mine, birthday cards, letters, photos I had mailed after my mother told me contact had to go through her for Noah's stability. Aunt Elise untied the ribbon. Mara gave birth to Noah at 21 after leaving a dangerous relationship. She nearly died from complications afterward. Diane and Robert convinced her to sign temporary guardianship while she recovered. My father snapped. She was unstable. Elise turned on him. She was hospitalized. Caleb's mother covered her mouth. Elise laid more papers on the table. Then they changed the mailing address, withheld court notices, returned her gifts, and told Mara that Noah was better off without her. They told Noah she chose a new life without him. Noah looked at me then. You wrote these, he asked. My voice broke. Every year. He picked up one envelope, the corner worn from being hidden too long. They said you didn't ask about me. I asked, I said. I begged. I believed them when they said seeing me would hurt you. Diane reached for his shoulder. Noah, sweetheart, you don't understand. He stepped away from her. That tiny movement did more than any speech could have. Aunt Elise slid bank statements beside the letters. They also collected money meant for Noah's care while I raised him. The room shifted. Caleb's father stood first. Robert, he said, you and Diane need to leave. Dad looked around, waiting for someone to defend him. No one did. By the next week, Caleb's parents had paid the remaining wedding balance directly to the vendors, so my parents could not use money as a leash. Diane and Robert were removed from the ceremony and from every planning decision. The attorney filed to correct the custody record, restore supervised contact on Noah's terms, and pursue civil action over the withheld communication and misused funds. The fallout did not stay inside that dinner room. My mother had made the accusation publicly, so the truth spread publicly too. Guests stopped returning her calls. My father resigned from his community board after Elise's documents reached people he had spent years impressing. As for me, I told my parents one final thing through my attorney. They were not invited to the wedding, they were not allowed near Noah, and they were no longer part of the family I was building. Months later, Caleb and I married in a smaller room with fewer flowers and no speeches from people who had tried to ruin us. Noah came by choice. He sat beside Aunt Elise, wearing the same navy shirt, the blue ribbon from the letters wrapped around his wrist. After the ceremony, he walked up to me and said, "Can we read one together sometime?" I nodded because I could not trust my voice. The lost years did not vanish. Nothing that big disappears just because the truth finally comes out. But every week after that, Noah and I sat across from each other with one letter, one story, one honest answer at a time. My parents tried to end my wedding with a lie. Instead, they handed me the proof that brought my son back.